Hello. So last month I went to Nagasaki and this video is going to be about that. From Osaka, it takes around 5 hours to reach there by train. If you're talking in terms of distances, then the distance between Osaka and Nagasaki would be roughly equal to the distance between Pune and Mangalore. My motivation for going to Nagasaki was that I've been to Hiroshima before and I really liked the museum over there and the unique feel of the city. And Nagasaki is also one of the bombing sites, and I just wanted to visit it and see what the city of Nagasaki would feel like. I was there for 4 days. Let's get started chronologically. So, on day 1, I reached Nagasaki station at around 5 pm, and I immediately made my way towards Glover Garden. Nagasaki is a relatively small city, and it's surrounded by mountains on the sides. Okay, so this right here is the Nagasaki station, and this line that you see in the center is the central tram line, and most of the places that you would want to visit, you can use this line. Okay, so the first place that I went to was this place called Glover Garden, and you can see it over here, Glover Garden. So Glover Garden is basically like this estate, which is kind of on the top of the hill, and from there you have a very good viewpoint of the Nagasaki port. The name comes because of the British trader Thomas Glover, who lived here during the 19th century, and many of his friends, who were also wealthy traders like himself, lived in this area. A lot of the houses from that period have been preserved, so you can walk around, have a look at them, and also look at the beautiful Nagasaki Bay. The walk down from Glover Garden was a very pleasant one. It was almost 7 pm and all the shops had closed and the crowd had dispersed. Oh, there's also a very famous church next to the Glover Garden called the Ora Cathedral. I didn't get time to make it this time, but maybe you can go. And finally, to end the day, I went to have dinner at this cafe called Nobistar. And I had this leafy vegetable for the very first time called Swiss chard. It had a very unique taste, and personally I found it quite tasty. So the next morning, I went to the Atomic Bomb Museum and the Peace Park that is nearby. This statue is located near the entrance. As you enter the museum, this is one of the clocks that was found after the bombing, which stopped exactly at the time that the bomb was dropped, 11:02. And these are the ruins of the Urakami Church. Let me just take a detour over here to talk about Christians and Nagasaki. So, Nagasaki was Japan's gateway to the Western world, and around the year 1600, there were quite a lot of Christians living in Nagasaki. And then, for some fear of a conquest, Christianity was banned, and it remained that way until 250 years when the ban was finally lifted. And here's an incident that became quite famous at the time, the story of the hidden Christians. So basically, all the Christians who were there in Nagasaki at that time, when the ban was put in place, they fled to the nearby islands. They disguised their prayers in a way such that they would not be caught. And 250 years, that's basically 8 generations of people. And they hang on to their faith for 8 generations. And they passed it down. And finally, when the ban was lifted, many of them came back to Nagasaki. And this episode of the hidden Christians being found again is quite famous. So coming back to the ruins of the church that you see in this museum over here, after the ban was lifted, they worked really hard and built one of the finest churches in East Asia, just for it to be demolished around 20 years after it was constructed. After the World War II, a new Urakami church was built, and this is what it looks like. This is like a glass bottle that got melted in the bombing, and it was put here where visitors could even touch the bottle and see what it feels like. There's also this block of charred rice which is found inside maybe one of the kids' tiffin boxes. The horrors of the atomic bomb, not just for the people who died in the crash, but even for the ones left behind and all the trauma that it left behind, it's just, I couldn't do justice to it even if I tried to put it in words. Which is why I think if you ever get a chance to visit either the museum in Hiroshima or Nagasaki, I would say it's a must visit. But for now, allow me to read out this passage that is under one of these famous photos in the museum. When I arrived at Nagasaki from Sasebo, I looked down at the city from the top of a low hill. I saw some men wearing a white mask. They were working near a ditch full of burning coal. I noticed a boy, about 10 years old, walking by. He was carrying a baby slung on his back. In those days in Japan, it was common to see children playing in the vacant lots with their little brothers or sisters on their backs. But this boy was clearly different. I could see that he had come to this burning ground for a serious purpose. He was barefoot. When he reached the edge of the crematory, he stopped and peered ahead with a fixed expression. The infant's head was tipped back, as if the baby were fast asleep. The boy stood there, next to the area, for about 10 minutes. The men in white masks walked over to him and gently began undoing the cords that were holding the baby. Then I first realized that the baby was already dead. The men held the boy by the hands and feet and placed it gently on the hot coals. The infant's boy made a hissing sound as it was placed in the fire. Then it lit up in brilliant flames, like a deep red of the setting sun. The boy stood there, erect and motionless, with his innocent cheeks shining scarlet. I noticed that the lips of the boy were also streaked with red as he watched the flames. He was biting his lower lip so hard that it shone with blood. The flames burned low, like the sun going down, and the boy turned around and walked silently away from the burning pit. This is a picture from the Peace Park nearby. And this is the very famous peace statue in Nagasaki. And personally for me, even though the name of this god never appears anywhere nearby, it looked a lot like Shiva. After all the walking around in the morning and afternoon, in the evening I went to this onsen called Fuku no Yu. So, if you don't know what an onsen is, it's like a public bathing space. So you'd be naked in front of strangers, and there like these public tubs or pools of hot water where you can soak and relax yourself. It might sound a little weird at first, and the first time I went to an onsen in Osaka, all I could see was, it was a little weird. But I've been to an onsen a couple of times now, and it doesn't even faze me. The fact that, people are naked, or that I'm naked in front of them, it's like I'm not really that conscious of that fact anymore. Coming back to this onsen, Fuku no Yu, one part about it that I really liked is it's by the hillside. So there's this outdoor pool where you can relax in the hot water, and while facing the breezy winds from the hillside, and also being able to look at the Nagasaki view from kind of like the side of the hill. So if you do come to Nagasaki, then I would definitely put Fuku no Yu on the recommended list. By the way, for dinner, I had this thing called tempura, which is basically fried vegetables or vegetable bhaji. In the fried vegetables thing, I also had this fried vegetable called gobo, which looks kind of like this. I'd never eaten it in India before. The next day in the morning, I went to this place called Meganebashi, and it's basically this spot where there's this series of bridges, kind of like what you see in this picture. And the most famous out of all of them is this bridge called Meganebashi, which looks like spectacles, and megane in Japanese means spectacles. A special ice cream that you get over here is this vanilla ice cream, which is shaped like a rose. In the afternoon, I went to the Nagasaki Museum. This building that you see right here, that's the one. Oh, and by the way, remember when I said that Nagasaki is like a city surrounded by hills? In this picture, looking at these houses on the slope, it really does make you feel that. We weren't really allowed to take pictures at a lot of places in the museum, but where I could, I just want to share those pictures. So this is kind of like what the kanji looked during the period. The period we are talking about is late 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, almost 200 years ago. And there was this Dutch trading post over here during the time, and people exchanged a lot of medical information or knowledge back then. And this is one picture that I found. And what I find really intriguing about this is look at how detailed these pictures are. And keep in mind that this was made 200 years ago. So, I mean, this also speaks to, how evolved medical science was already back then. This is a painting of the Nagasaki port during that time. I really like this painting. This is like a Japanese and Dutch dictionary. So what you see over here horizontally is, I guess, the Dutch parts. And you also see some other parts which are written vertically over here, which are, I think, the Japanese kanji parts. Here's a map from Nagasaki to other parts of the world back then. The orientation is a little different from what you would usually be used to, but still interesting. Another thing I found in this museum was there was this display which was displaying various stage acts of incidents that were said to have happened 200 years ago in Nagasaki.
戸町湾市を固めておる鍋島藩の万兵は何をしておるのか。直ちに軍船を攻撃させよ。ただいまのところ万象には
I spent quite some time here watching these videos. And out of the various videos that I saw, there's the story of this one person that I'd like to narrate. So in 1824, this guy called Dr. von Siebold came to Nagasaki. He was a German-born physician, and at some point he got involved with the Dutch army, and he came to Nagasaki as part of the Dutch trading post in the capacity as a physician and a scientist. When he came to Nagasaki in 1824, he was around 27 years old. He learned a lot of the new cutting-edge Western medicine at the time, and it was through him that many people in Japan got to know about it. And he even opened his own school in Nagasaki, and famous people from all over Japan came to Nagasaki in order to specifically learn from him. And 2 years in, he also gets married to this Japanese woman called Otaki, and I think they also have a daughter. And the reason why he has to leave at some point 6 years later is that there's an incident, and this is a pretty famous incident called the Siebold incident. So what happens is he comes to be in possession of some maps of northern Japan, which was forbidden at the time. And he's punished for it, and his punishment is that he has to leave Nagasaki and leave Japan, and he can't come back. And it's kind of sad because his wife goes up to the judge and she's like, he's not a bad man, it's just a misunderstanding. He even treats people for free. We have a 1-year-old daughter, don't break our family apart. But the judge refuses to let him stay. And at this point, his wife, she even says, well then let me go to Europe with him. But even that is forbidden. And so Siebold has to leave. Oh, and by the way, in this incident, around 50 officials in Japan were punished because he got a hold of that map. And as Siebold is leaving, he tells his wife that, don't cry. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding and soon it'll be cleared and I'll be back in Japan soon. And here's a letter that he writes to her after departing from Japan. And allow me to roughly translate it. He's saying stuff like, I'm in the ship, I'm kind of feeling sick, but hopefully I'll be fine. and I really miss you and our daughter, and I hope to see you again soon. And the sad part is the misunderstanding does not get cleared soon, okay? And it takes 33 years for the ban to be lifted, and he finally does come back to Nagasaki at the age of 63. And he does get to finally meet his wife and daughter, who is now a physician in her own right, and he gets to see them again. I don't know why, but I do like the story of Seabold in Japan. He's probably maybe not as famous in Europe or elsewhere, but he is really famous in Japan. In fact, in 1924, which marked the 100-year anniversary of Seabold coming to Nagasaki, the people of Nagasaki celebrated that event. And given that he was here for just 6 years, but his arrival was still celebrated 100 years later, I don't know what he did, but he sure did touch the lives of the Japanese people while he was here. In the evening, I went to the Inasayama ropeway. Remember this picture back from Glover Garden? This faraway structure that you see on the hill is what the ropeway takes you to. The view from the top is said to be one of the best night views all over the world. And I timed my visit so as to be able to see the sunset as well as catch the night view.
Please face the direction of the city. 長崎の街並みが次第に見えてまいりました。坂の町長崎と言われる複雑な地形に家々が密集して立つ斜面都市長崎の独特な様子がお分かりいただけるかと思います。さて、まもなく眼下に見えてまいります。
Okay, we're finally on to the last day and the last trip. In the last trip, I went to Gunkanjima or Battleship Island, and it became famous recently because it featured in one of the Bond movies. But it's called the Battleship Island because it kind of looks like a battleship. So in the map over here, you can see this point is the Nagasaki station, and over here we have the Glover Garden, and this is Gunkanjima. This island was established in 1887 and it belonged to the Mitsubishi company, and the people who lived here were primarily workers who were there to mine the coal that was found underneath the island. And the mining continued until 1974 when the mines also got depleted, and due to a shift from coal to oil, they had to shut down this island. So no one lives here anymore, but it is a World Heritage Site and you can visit it. This is the boat that we used to get to the island. Now, on our way over there, we were shown this plastic model, and our guide wonderfully explained some of the stuff that we could see on Gunkanjima. So over here you have the school, which is a 7-storied school. And to the right side, you also have like a school ground. And behind the school, you had a hospital, and then behind that, residential buildings. And then in the center over here, you have the building for Mitsubishi administration. And then over here, you have the mines. And to the left over here is one of the first concrete residential buildings in Japan. And this is a spot that we can see when we get off at the island. The rest of the island is off limits and we can't really go there now. So this is apparently a photo of what a usual home in Gunkanjima looked like. And this is like a swimming pool inside Gunkanjima. Over here you have what seems to be like a convenience store, and then some people celebrating a festival. And this is people planting greenery on top of their terraces. It is said that initially Gunkanjima did not have any greenery, and which is why the residents over here, after a while, they wanted to make this place feel like home, which is why they resorted to putting soil on top of the terraces and planting some stuff over there. Okay, compared to the model, this is like the back side of Gunkanjima. This is my favorite picture of Gunkanjima. Okay, we finally get down on the island, and the pool that we saw earlier, well, the pool's dried up now and this is what it looks like. This tower over here is said to be where the miners would go underneath from, and once they came out, this white tiles that you see over here, they are said to have been a kind of public bath where the miners could wash themselves after coming back up. Gunkanjima is a World Heritage Site. It lies in ruins now, but at one time, people spent their lives here. And this is not such a big island. It's like 500 meters by 160 meters. So if you went to a school where in the school ground you could run a 100-meter race lengthwise, then this island is roughly 4 times the area of such a ground. So not a lot. But people spent their lives here. At its peak, 5,000 people lived on this island, which gave it a population density that was 9 times that of Tokyo during the same time. And all these people, they experienced very similar things to the rest of us. Going to school, falling in love, going to buy groceries, losing a loved one. And it's said that sometimes when the weather was bad, everyone would gather on top of the terrace and look down as the waves engulfed the lower half of their island, their homes. And well, yeah, that ends my Nagasaki trip. On our way back, we also came across another boat that was going out. Overall, this was a very nice trip, and Nagasaki clearly has a very rich history, and I'm glad that I could go to these museums and various places and learn about it. You know, as a kid, maybe I didn't really appreciate museums, but now I'm sure glad that they're there. One thing that I do feel after this trip is I do feel closer to Japan in some way. In the sense that I'm not Japanese, I wasn't born here, but I'm here now, and I'm going to try my best to belong.